Today we're going to take a look at how to create a seamless texture that has nails in it. You can see how this material has various wooden boards, each with a nail at a corner. We'll be using Genetica in this tutorial, which can be downloaded at this URL. If you break down how this texture was created, you can see that it is really composed of three distinct layers or steps. First is the basic wood material that the boards are created from. Then this material is taken and turned into individual boards, and finally nails are added at the corners of the boards. Each of these steps will be represented by a node in Genetica. Okay, let's get started. Begin by clicking the New button here to start a new document. And now recall that the first of the three steps in creating our texture was to create the basic wood material that the boards will be made out of. The quickest way to create a wood material is with a synthesis node, which will allow us to create a texture from a photograph. So if the advanced nodes category is selected here, drag a synthesis node into the empty slot, and then you can open its options window by double-clicking it. Now we could create our own wood texture from scratch, pick our own wood photo and everything, but to speed things up, I'm just going to use one of the presets, make sure the wood category is selected here, and then pick a wood that you like. I'm going to use plywood 2 here. I'll select that and click OK. And so we've completed our first step. Now if at any point you want to check up on our progress, you can always click the Render Texture button here. And this is what we have so far. Okay, so back in the Nodes tab, we see that we have our synthesis node, and that's creating the basic wood material. And now we want to take that and turn that into some boards. That can be done with the Cut and Tile lab, which is also found in the Advanced Nodes category. So I'll drag this node onto the synthesis node that we have in here, and then select Insert Below. And you can see that we've created a little bit of a pipeline here. First a wood texture is created, then it's passed on down into the Cut and Tile lab, and it's turning that texture into some, they look like bricks with this big thick gooey mortar in between them, which obviously isn't what we want for this texture, so we can double click that and then start playing with the settings. The settings are organized into a number of categories here. The first one that we care about is Select Pattern, and you can see here's where that basket weave brick pattern is coming from. To change that, click Select Type, and then select a pattern you want. For our texture, that will be long boards here. The next section that will be of interest to us is Mortar Width, and that's how we get rid of this thick gooey mortar here. We can turn that all the way down. And let's just render the texture to see what we have so far. So one problem I see with it is that while the boards are vertical, the wood grain seems to be horizontal, and that's not how wood boards are created. So I'll go back to the Cut and Tile lab here, and this can be fixed in the Scramble section. This is the place where the input material is cut up into pieces and then randomized into the individual boards. And with the Material Orientation property, we can select On Side, and that just flipped the orientation, so now the boards and the wood grain go the same way. The next interesting section is Bevel, and if we just go back to what we had rendered, one thing we see is that these boards look really rounded, and that's probably not very realistic for a wood floor. And if you see the Curve property here, by setting that to 0, we can get rid of the rounding. And now it has sharp edges, but obviously the bevel is way too deep and thick. So first I'll reduce width to 6, and then depth to 1. Now the bevel's looking a lot better for us. Finally, let's take a look at mortar material, and you can see there is a little bit of mortar. Even at the minimum mortar width, there is a bit of mortar appearing between the boards. And to make that more visible, I'll darken these colors into nice deep brownish colors. And now you can really see how there's a thin sliver of mortar between the boards. Now, if you wanted to get rid of that completely, you could turn mortar opacity all the way down to 0. Now, I don't actually like to do this because a little bit of mortar kind of makes the boards pop a little bit. And you don't have to think of it as mortar. You could think of it as dirt between the boards or just a bit of discoloration. But one way or the other, I personally prefer to have a little bit of color between the boards. So I'm going to set mortar opacity to some kind of compromise value, like 60, to add a bit of color. So back in the Nodes tab, we see how we have the node that's creating our wood texture, and then the next node that's turning it into boards. And now finally we want to add a node that will add nails on top of the texture. And that can be done with a canvas node, again found in the advanced category. And the canvas node is the node that will let you actually draw seamless textures or draw on top of an existing texture. So I'm going to drag this canvas, drop it there, and select Insert Below. And it kind of removed our texture there, and that's because the canvas node doesn't know that what's up there is supposed to be the background of the texture. So let's tell it. Let's double click the canvas node to open its options and begin by drawing a shape. I'm going to draw a rectangle right here. And by default, all shapes are filled with this blue. And we want to change that. Instead of blue, that should be our wood boards. So to change the style of a layer, you click Style, Edit. And each style is composed of any number of layers. The default style is just a single layer that fills it blue, so I'm going to select that. And instead of Fill Color, we want Fill Input Texture. Now I'm going to click OK there. And after a moment, our wood texture appears. And what Fill Input Texture means is it will take the input texture and fill it into the shape. So now if the Transform tool is selected, I just want to move that and make the shape cover the entire canvas. And now we're ready to draw on top of the texture. Create a new layer by clicking this button here. And now let's create a circle. I'm going to hold down the Shift key, which constrains the proportion while I drag to make sure it's a perfect circle. Again, you have the default style here. So we'll edit that just like we did before. In the Metal Shiny category, I'm going to select this Desert Reflection. We can't simply shrink that shape, and let me show you why. I'm going back to the Transform tool, and if that's selected, I'm doing Control-C to copy and Control-V to paste. So we'll have a duplicate here. And now I'll go back here and I'm going to start shrinking that, and I'm holding down the Shift key to constrain the proportions. And notice what happens when I shrink it. The bevel remains the same width, and the shadow of this style also remains the same size. And as I shrink this more and more, that becomes a bit of a problem. If I really shrunk this, you can see that style is now too big for a nail. For one thing, you can't see the bevel anymore because the width of the bevel is the same as the width of the shape itself. And the other thing is that shadow is way too thick for a shape of that size. It looks like the nail is poking out of the floor to poke you in the eye or something. Now, styles have a very useful feature that's often overlooked. And if you click the Style tool here, you can see you can actually scale the styles. Now we want these features to be smaller, so you want to increase the scale here, and every time I do that, you can see how the bevel gets smaller and the shadow gets smaller and tighter. And as I keep doing that, the style becomes much more appropriate for a small shape. So now I'm going to go back to the Transform tool and delete that circle we no longer need. And now let's start creating some nails. I'm going to shrink that some more, again holding down the Shift button. And good nail should be quite small. That's probably small enough. And I'll put that at the corner there. Now I want to make sure the circle is selected here, not the layer. Then I can copy, paste just the circle instead of the entire layer. Then I can drag that over there. And I can keep positioning them in that manner. And that would do the job. But I want to take the opportunity to show you a little trick, another often overlooked trick, and that's how you can position them numerically. So I'll delete this second one here. And the first thing I want to do is make sure that's perfectly positioned from the corner. You can see here the coordinates, and it's not. Those are different. So I'm going to do 3.2 there, and 3.2 there, and now I know it's perfectly positioned from the corner. Now I want that nail, which is 3.2 from the corner, to be 3.2 from that corner. Copy, paste it. And the way the scale works in the canvas node is this edge is position 0, and that edge is position 100. And if I count the number of boards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, what's the width of a board? Well, that would be 100 divided by 6. So the trick that's often overlooked is you can type in simple math operations directly into any place where you can enter a number in Genetica. So this position, I'm going to type in 100 divided by 6 and hit enter, and it will calculate it for me. That's 16.67, and it will position it right at that edge. Now obviously I don't want the nail at that edge, I want it 3.2 to the left of that edge. So I can go here and I can type in minus 3.2, and it does it for me. I'll select the first nail, copy, paste. And now instead of 3.2 from the top, I want it 3.2 from the bottom. So I want it 3.2 less than 100. So I'll go here and I'll type in 100 minus 3.2, and now it moves it perfectly to that corner. And I don't have to wonder if I positioned it correctly because I did it numerically. I'll repeat the process there. 100 minus 3.2. We could continue this numerical game and keep positioning all these nails, but that would get a little tiresome. Instead, I'm going to go here and I'm going to drag over all 4 nails, and I'll group them by pressing this group button. Then I'll do copy, paste the entire group. And now I want to move this over by a 1/6, which we remember was 16.67. So I'll do plus 16.67, and that moves it over. Now I want to move it down by a 1/3. And if the entire distance is 100, a 1/3 would be 33.33. So I'm going to type in plus 33.33, and it moved it down by a 1/3. Now notice how these nails actually left the area of the document, but because Genetica is all about creating seamless textures, any shape that leaves that edge automatically wraps around the opposite edge, so you still have the nails positioned right where you want them. So we can repeat that process. Now we've positioned another set. Now you'll notice that these 3 boards here are identical to those 3 boards. They're just shifted over by half. So I'll select all 3 groups this time, copy, paste them. And instead of 25, I'll add 50, but I think I can do that in my head. 75, and now the nails have been shifted over. So let's render the texture and see what we have so far. This is looking pretty good, but these nails may be a little over the top, so I'm going to go back to the Canvas tab and edit the style. Now I'll select this crumpled gold preset. It might work a little better. Render again. And now I think these nails match the texture a little bit more.